You're tuned to Night Nerves, where if it's scary, creepy, thrilling, or disturbing, we read it, watch it, and talk about it. I'm Sam, and today I want to talk about some of my favorite zebra horror novels. But first, I'd like to give you a brief history on Zebra Books. Zebra Books is an imprint of the Kensington Publishing Corporation. Zebra was founded in 1975, and their primary focus at its inception was romance novels. However, they started to notice the booming success of paperback horror sales in the marketplace, and they decided to get into the horror game themselves. In the late 70s, they started to put out their own paperback horror novels, and in the 80s, they really hit their stride. Despite Zebra's eagerness to jump into the horror genre, they did have some budgetary restraints, so they had to be very particular with how they recruited authors and how they put out their paperback novels. Zebra's strategy included finding lesser-known horror authors desperate to put out their horror stories, and also some bigger names in the horror genre that were having trouble finding a home for their story, and they would pay these authors very little money and really throw their budget at getting a striking cover for the book. Zebra novels are infamous for their eye-popping cover art. A lot of times they featured skeletal figures wearing clothing, wearing hats, wearing shoes, doing activities that normal humans with skin would participate in. And when these novels did not feature a skeleton on the cover, they often featured creepy, scary, and striking images that screamed, "This is a horror novel." As you could imagine, Zebra did not develop a reputation for putting out quality horror stories. A lot of these stories were silly, convoluted, and sometimes facile, and it really seemed like they were just trying to cash in on the horror boom. But in any case, these became incredibly popular, particularly recently with the release of paperbacks from Hell. And while I myself have read my fair share of doozies from the Zebra horror line, I have also read more than a handful of great, fun, and memorable Zebra horror novels, and I want to share with you 6 of these today. If you've watched other videos that I've put out, you might recognize 2 of these titles which I've talked about in other videos. One last thing to note before we jump into this list: unfortunately, not all of these books are easily accessible, but I think part of the fun in collecting and reading vintage horror is the thrill of the hunt, going out there and searching and seeing what you find and what you're going to be reading next. So without further ado, let's look at some Zebra horror titles that I've really enjoyed. The first Zebra horror novel I want to talk about is Near Dead, written by Stephen R. George, published by Zebra in 1992. Near Dead follows a man named Taylor who 3 years prior to when the novel takes place, lost his wife and his young daughter at the hands of a sadistic and satanic serial killer. Taylor is at work going about his day when he sees the ghosts of his wife and his daughter covered in gore, and they communicate to him that the killer is back, he's killing again, and that Taylor needs to stop the killer so that their souls can rest in peace. Stephen R. George published a number of Zebra horror novels, and in my opinion, he is one of the stronger writers that wrote for Zebra. Character development is not one of George's strong suits. A lot of times he tends to write archetypal characters, which is the case here in Near Dead. But in most novels of his that I've read, he likes to explore fresh and unconventional storylines in the horror genre, and I believe that's part of the reason why he chooses to write these archetypal characters, so he can focus more on the story. Near Dead blends a serial killer thriller story with supernatural horror. There's demons and liminal spaces in the novel, and it even is a bit emotional towards the end, at least I thought so. This is a fun and violent read. The next Zebra horror novel that we are talking about is The Dark One, written by the legendary pulp author Guy N. Smith. The Dark One follows a nuclear family named the Gorlays. There's a husband, wife, and 2 kids, and they agree to watch this boy named Marcel, who is the son of some family friends of theirs, for a couple days, and Marcel is quite the delinquent troublemaker. He is described as being smelly, rude, he's always sweaty, he's a bit overweight, and he gets into tons and tons of trouble. He gets other people into trouble. He's disruptive, he's rude, he's annoying. Pretty early on, the Gourlays are becoming sick of Marcel and all of his antics, but this is only the tip of the iceberg, because what the Gourlays will soon find out is that Marcel possesses some very dark and sinister supernatural powers that he is not afraid to use. If you could not tell by that description, the Dark One is an entry in the evil child subgenre of horror, but because it's written by Guy N. Smith, this is more violent, more gory, and much more pulpy than your average evil child outing. The novel is silly and demented, and it is by no means a good book, but it is a very entertaining read. It is a page turner, and again, it is loads and loads of fun. Next up, we have House of Illusions, written by Ruby Jean Jensen. House of Illusions follows two sisters named Amy and Jody who go off to live with their dad, who travels with the carnival, and it seems like a dream come true at first. They get free cotton candy and snacks. There's tons of rides and amusement parks there with the carnival. But what they discover in the mysterious House of Illusions is an amulet that unleashes evil powers from within. Ruby Jean Jensen is another author who frequently put out books through Zebra, and this is a book that I read this past summer and I had a ton of fun reading it. As I mentioned, this book takes place at a carnival, which I love, and it's got almost everything that I think makes up a perfect pulp horror novel. It has a slightly crazy storyline, it's got evil clowns, a House of Illusions, among other amusements, and it's got some really great characters. I even liked a lot of the minor characters in this story. This is actually one of the more accessible books on this list. A lot of Ruby Jean Jensen's books were republished by a different publisher a couple years back, so you can get this in hardcover, you can get this in paperback. If you are building out a summer TBR, consider adding House of Illusions to it. I don't think you'll regret it. This next book is titled Hellhound, written by Ken Greenhall, published by Zebra in 1977. Hellhound follows a sociopathic bull terrier named Baxter as he searches without mercy to find his perfect human companion. Hellhound is a dogsploitation novel that has no business being as amazing as it is. It's disturbing, it's very well written, and it's a very unique story. It has two distinct perspectives. One is a first-person perspective, POV, from Baxter, where we're in his head, we're seeing what he's seeing, we're thinking what he's thinking, and we get a glimpse at his desires, his sinister plans, and what he plans to do to those around him. And the second perspective is from the third person, and it's a more objective look at the people in Baxter's life. And it's really notable and impressive how Greenhall uses these two perspectives to create dread and tension in the story. A lot of times we have an idea of what Baxter is planning, but he's not like Cujo. He doesn't just go crazy and react to things or attack people. He's very, very calculating in the way that he inflicts harm into other people. The more time that passes since I've read this book, the more I appreciate it. Similar to House of Illusions, Hellhound is an accessible novel thanks to Valancourt Books. I've actually seen this on the shelves of the horror section in Barnes & Noble, so you can pick up a copy today and read it if you haven't already. If you are into killer dogs, you really can't go wrong with Hellhound. Pick it up, give it a read, you won't regret it. And speaking of well-written Zebra horror novels, this is the perfect segue into my next recommendation, which is Hindsight, written by Ronald Kelly. Hindsight takes place in Tennessee in the 1930s, and it follows a little girl named Cindy who has the gift of second sight and needs to use it to bring several killers to justice. Aside from being well written, Hindsight is something of an outlier when compared to the other books on this list. It's billed as a horror novel, but it definitely is more of like a supernatural historical fiction story. It reminded me a lot of Stephen King's The Dead Zone, so bear that in mind. You're not going to get a dread-filled story when you pick up Hindsight, but it is, again, as I mentioned, a very well-written novel, a well-told story. And it's a book that as I was reading it and I would close it, I would totally forget that I was reading a zebra horror novel. So if that sounds like your kind of story, if you've enjoyed books like The Dead Zone, you might like Hindsight. I believe Macabre Inc. put out a reprint of this several years back. I will link it in the description if it is available. And last, but certainly not least, we have Creers, written by Edward Lee. There's a really great synopsis on the back of this novel, so instead of trying to summarize it myself, I'm just gonna read the back. Creek City is a small hick town. Violent, mean, and dirt poor, it's a place nobody wants to call home. But for homicide cop Phil Straker, it is home. And now someone, or something, is turning his boyhood town into a bloody sideshow of mutilation and gruesome carnage. They're called Creekers. Centuries old, driven by rage and lust for revenge, they move through the deep, dark woods, deformed, shadowy outcasts with twisted faces and blood-red eyes. Now, as the moon hangs low over their ancient house, they're gathering for a harvest of terror and death Creek City will never forget. Creekers mixes a dark neo-noir crime story with backwoods horror. This is a splatterpunk story that is violent, shocking, and brutal. Edward Lee is no stranger to the splatterpunk and extreme horror subgenres. He has quite a large catalog, and most of his books fall within those categories. I could see how it would be easy for someone to dismiss Edward Lee as being just another splatterpunk author who likes to write violent, shocking, and disturbing, and oftentimes gross horror stories, but to me, he is much, much more than that. Edward Lee is an excellent writer. His characters are well developed, his prose are tight and descriptive, and he really knows how to set a scene. He knows when to show restraint and when to go balls to the wall. I freaking love this book. This is a great splatterpunk novel. It is, as I mentioned, more on the extreme side, but by today's standards, it's, I would say, not very extreme. If you are looking for a zebra horror novel that's going to push some boundaries, you can't go wrong with Creekers. There you have it, 6 zebra horror novels that I really enjoyed, and I hope you do too. If any of these books sound interesting to you, if you have read any of these books and you have opinions on them, let me know down below. Thank you so much for tuning in, for hanging out with me. This is a video that I've been wanting to do for a long time. Way before I started this channel, I've wanted to talk about zebra horror novels that I love. I don't think this is gonna be a standalone video. I could see doing another couple videos talking about more zebra horror novels that I really enjoy. So I hope you're game for that. Make sure to like this video, leave a comment, share this video with a friend, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. It really does help out the channel. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope to see you in the next one. Stay spooky.